Ladies and gentlemen, we got a big blue banter crossover. We got Monty, we got Sal here. Everyone, how we doing?
Doing good, man. Thank you guys for jumping on with us. This is well overdue. Been meaning to, do a show with you guys. Two of our favorite guys on, Giants content, Giants Twitter. So pleasure to be here with you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys for us.
Oh, yeah. We're excited to do this. We've been meaning to do this for a while. We actually planned like a year and a half ago to get Sal on the show. We were going to do like a little fun Giants all-time draft, but just never came together. So it's fun that we got this chance to collab. And I am going for making a run here at the worst lighting ever in the history of a show, though I will say it probably won't surpass. Remember, Nick, the Vegas episode when we were recording when I was in Vegas like a year or two ago, and someone was like, it looked like you're in the witness protection program based on the lighting. And it's bright day out in Vegas that day. I don't really know what happened, but just a weird angle, just like this. I will fix the lighting at some point, but for today, we're gonna have to deal with this version of the lighting.
I'm expecting somebody to walk in the background and be like, "Well, what are you hiding in the closet, Dan? What's in there?"
What you got going on? So for the Big Blue Banter listeners, Monty and Sal, if you guys do not know, if you're not on Giants Twitter, they host a podcast called He's a Giant, and it's draft oriented, and they basically dive deep into a lot of the prospects in the NFL and how that player can fit on the New York Giants. They do an excellent job. It's a newer podcast, but I encourage everyone to go check them out.
Thank you, man.
You always come to us and say, where's your draft content? What's going on? And we're always like, don't expect it anytime soon until maybe February at the earliest. And most likely even the month after that, but not typically February. And so if you need it earlier, which you want it, go to these guys. They got you covered. Both Monty and Sal, they're both really good at what they do. You should check them out because they go deep. They go really deep on these prospects. And it's good to get, I feel like it's good to get a feel for them this early because then you can actually watch on Saturday and know what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we came up with the idea for the pod, it was just because we both love college football so much. We're like, you know what? Let's just talk about it as it's happening in real time. It would be kind of fun to see how these players play out. And, as you'll see, we'll do the early position groups, and we're often way off on the players because by the time the season ends, it's completely flipped over. But our first episode last year, and our first episode, our pilot was wide receivers. And the guy that I think I jinxed us because I really wanted a quarterback. But I remember saying, the guy I can really see being a Giant here is Malik Neighbors. I was like, he's the prototype. He's the prototype. I remember Monty and I was saying, are we so sure he's not going to end up the best wide receiver in this group at the end of his career? And we were both like, yeah, we can see it, So that one played out. But thank you guys for having us. We had an idea for those who are paying attention and listening to kind of do a crossover that tried to combine some of the stuff that these guys do on Big Blue Banter and what we do, and He's a Giant. We're going to go through some cool pre-season scouting, looking for what can help the Giants, and we're going to tap into Dan and Nick's expertise, and then Monty and I will try to help out from there from what we do. But Dan, to steal your quote, we want to talk some 30,000 foot view stuff. So we wanted to hear your guys' thoughts. I don't think you've actually said it exactly yet. Where are you with this organization that right now, this organization, the season? What's your 30,000 foot view? What to expect and where we are?
I could take it first, Dan. So I think the New York Giants are in a position where it's all going to come down to the quarterback right now, right? There were these investments in the offensive line. We've heard this story. How many times have we received this script, ladies and gentlemen, right? Oh, we've invested in the offensive line. Here we go. Oh, we drafted this top 10 guy, and then it usually doesn't end up materializing. I think I remain optimistic about the offensive line right now. I think the offensive line situation last year, it was just a tire fire because Andrew Thomas got injured on that first drive. I think that was a huge deal, and the Giants entered the season with a lack of depth on their offensive line, and they had a bunch of young players that they were going to give a chance to. And then when Andrew Thomas got hurt, that kicked Josh Azudu out to left tackle, and then you had Marcus McKeith in, and it was just – there wasn't enough depth. And I think if you look at what Joe Shane did this offseason, they were able to replenish that depth up front with John Runyon, Jermaine Illuminor, Aaron Stinney, Schlottman, if you want to throw him in there as well. So I think the offensive line situation should be better. I do believe, though, it's all going to come down to the quarterback and Daniel Jones. Look, he has his limitations. He's going to need his time to throw the football. Malik Neighbors is going to be the focal point. You don't have 26 anymore. If I'm going to go 30,000 foot view, I think the NFC is weak. I do. And I think the Giants have an opportunity to compete if things go their way, a la a 2022. I think a lot of that will be contingent on what they can do passing the football and how Shane Bowen's defense holds up. And I'm just hoping that the New York Giants offense can be competitive enough to allow the defense to get into some 3rd and 6 situations in the second half to allow what I think could be the strength of this team, the pass rush, to thrive and flourish. Because that's something that we did not get to see last year. I could see the Giants winning, 6 games, but I wouldn't be shocked they're winning 9 too, if all things break well for them. And it really just comes down to Daniel Jones. And that's a freaking question mark of the New York Giants since he arrived here in 2019.
Yeah, it's interesting from where I'm at with the 30,000 foot view, because I think about it like there was a point in time when the Giants made the decision to trade for and then sign to a massive extension Brian Burns. I felt like that signified a changing in the guard. And I felt like that meant, look, we're allocating that much of our salary cap space to this defensive player. And it means we're looking ahead and we're going to get out of the 40 million we're allocating to the quarterback. I'm not so sure about that anymore, just from watching a little bit of Hard Knocks and just from kind of putting 2 and 2 together. It kind of sounds to me like they believe they can compete right now with Daniel Jones as the quarterback. So at this point, to me, it depends on, can they make this offense quarterback proof? And there's been plenty of offenses in the NFL that actually have been pretty quarterback proof. I would consider the Dolphins offense to be pretty quarterback proof. I do respect what Tua does. I think he throws in anticipation really well and ball placement really well, but I think he has limitations as a quarterback too. Nick just mentioned Daniel Jones' limitations as a quarterback. I think Tua has clear cut on tape. You can watch it when he gets to the cold, or not even just the cold. Some teams that give him trouble, limitations on tape. But that system has done a really good job by him. Brock Purdy, I like more than consensus, a lot more than consensus. But in a lot of ways, that system, regardless of who's quarterback, is quarterback proof. We saw Jimmy G, who I think is one of the worst quarterbacks that I've seen in the NFL, be pretty good in that system and just horrific elsewhere. I guess he had at least little decent stint with the Patriots. But for the most part, those are 2 systems that have been quarterback proof. I don't want to say, because I love CJ Stroud, but I think that system really accentuated who he was as a quarterback as well. And we'll see. But I think Kevin O'Connell is in the mix as well for this in Minnesota, because look, you bring in Nick Mullins and he's throwing for 350 a game, 400 a game. Giants quarterbacks don't even sniff 250 a game most games for the last 5 years. It's the sad truth. Like last year, Tyrod Taylor went 270 and 270 in back-to-back games. It was the first time the Giants quarterback has thrown for 270 plus in back-to-back games since 2019. That's been 5 years. So we're talking about a system with Kevin O'Connell. It's getting passing production. So I'm hoping that this is the year we finally see Brian Daboll at his best, calling the plays and making this system. And again, it depends on what Nick says. 1, can Neighbors hit the ground running? That's the key part. And 2, can the offensive line do their part? But if those 2 things can happen, I'm hoping that what Shane envisions, which is a quarterback-friendly, a quarterback-proof system, can finally take place and take mold. And then, like Nick said, honestly, I do agree with him. I don't think the NFC is very tough. Like I look at the teams I'm worried about are San Fran, Green Bay to an extent, because I do like Jordan Love. Chicago's now in that mix for me. I'm not that worried about Dallas, the way they're trending. Eagles, I'm worried about, but I'm not as high on Hurts, I don't think, as others are, to be completely honest about the situation. And you got some older teams like the Falcons who are playing to win now. Rams, obviously, a similar situation with Stafford and Ryan there. So it kind of depends to me, can Daboll really take this system to the level that we've been promised he will? And we've seen glimpses of it on tape, Nick and I. We've seen great combos, routes, things like that, but it hasn't really shown up in the production standpoint from a passing standpoint yet.
Yeah. I think it's a good point, and something that Sal and I have talked about. We've tried to talk about what's the plan here at quarterback, what's the way that this team is moving forward, and kind of what you're saying. It feels like the plan at this point is just there is no clear answer at quarterback, so they're trying to build the best possible team they can, and without a clear future. If they were able to get Drake May, that would have changed things, but they couldn't. So now they're just all right, we're going to build a roster that's so strong that can carry us without having a true answer at quarterback. I don't necessarily think they've totally given up on Daniel Jones. That's what I've also started to pick up from Hard Knocks. It seems like, to me, the injuries are obviously a concern to them. They are not ignoring that he had that ACL. He's had 2 neck injuries. That's very clear. And they were very aware of the position they were in this draft, where they were picking 6 in a very good quarterback class, where if they had the chance to upgrade at the most important position in sports, they were willing to do that. But I don't think they necessarily have given up, as some fans, including myself, have, of where they were on Daniel Jones after he took them to the playoffs. I think they probably still have some hope there. one of my questions, though, to kind of what you were saying there, Dan, is, you talk about some of those QB-proof teams. You talk about like the Dolphins, and partially the reason Tua does so well there is because they built the perfect offense to like play to every single one of his strengths and get away from his weaknesses. I have yet to kind of see if Brian Dable wants to play. He has the ability to play to Daniel Jones' strength, but it seems like he wants to play his offense and he values that over playing to the strength of Daniel Jones. So that's another interesting part of this whole thing and where they're trying to move forward and where some of this Drew Lock like the rumors we're hearing and how that kind of might.
I'll push back a little on that, Monty, because I do think in his first season in 2022, it was the opposite of that. I don't think that offense is what Brian Dable wants his offense to look like at all. I think that offense was curtailing to Daniel Jones' strengths. Now, the issue is, and I know, unfortunately, some people are going to take offense to this and be offended by it and be so hurt and they can't fathom it. They can't understand it, whatever. But like, it's hard to figure out right now what Daniel Jones' strengths are. That's the issue right now. So I think at this point in time, and some people will say, well, he's very accurate. I haven't seen that on tape. I don't see the accuracy. Sure, you can point to me some rate stats from a year or two ago and look at these small sample size numbers, but just with your own eyes, when you watch on the tape, the ball placement. See, there's a difference between completing a pass and having completion percentage and having the ball placement put in a spot to maximize yards after the catch. And I haven't seen good ball placement consistently accurate ball, what I consider to be very accurate ball placement on anything but the deep dig route. That's one route I think he throws really well. That in breaking 15-yard route, he threw it to Slayton a bunch off play action with Garrett. He threw it with Dable a bunch. He can drive that ball in there with really good ball placement, timing, and velocity. But the short stuff, 1 to 5, hasn't been good. The crossing routes have not been good at any three levels. And I don't find his deep ball to be accurate. I think it gets there sometimes, but it's never really leading the receiver. And it's not what I would consider to be very accurate. So from a strength standpoint, he can run. That's one of his strengths. He's really good on the run. He got better, I thought, in 2022. And if we're, some people want to throw out 2023, that's fine because the injuries and the O-line. He got better at throwing on the run in 2022. I thought he got better at off-platform throws. These are clear areas he improved in. The pocket presence stuff felt like it was a bit fleeting to me, but we'll see what happens this year in that regard. Took a step back last year, took a step forward in 2022. It's kind of up in the air there. But at this stage in time, Brian Dable, I think, has to run his own offense. I think that's what he's doing by calling the plays because he has to be like, that's it. There's no more curtailing the offense of Daniel Jones because that's what they did in 2022, and it kind of worked. But then teams figured it out because they got tape on it, and there's no more running that kind of as Matt Harmon described it with the first year of Jalen Waddle in Miami before Tua, it was a Mickey Mouse offense. That's pretty much what the 2022 Giants offense was. It's not going to work anymore. It can't work. It's proven it's not going to work. It's done. Now he has to sink or swim in Brian Dable's version of the offense, what he wants it to be. And we'll see what can happen there. Because I think to your point, just one final thing on this, I don't think he's going to curtail it to Daniel Jones' skill set, which again, I'm not even quite sure what it really is right now.
And without Saquon too. It's a big difference for anything too.
Yeah, that old system can't work for that reason alone. Good point.
So I'm not sure I fully agree that we're going to see a full version of Brian Dable's ideal offense.
Okay.
Because, and here's why I'll say that. His first 2 seasons here, and I learned this by watching you guys, he tried that offense in the beginning of both seasons, right? He tried to push it down the field, and it just failed. And then, the first season they won games, but largely, they were winning because of explosive run plays by Saquon Barkley in the second half of games. If you remember that season, it was just, that's what was happening. It was freakish. It was almost unreplicable. And then last year just fell apart, right? They couldn't do anything on offense. And obviously it's not all Jones, but he was pretty awful. And then the line fell apart. Everything just went to shit. I think it was hard to see it play out. And I think if that happens again this year, now you don't have Barkley. If they try, I have no doubt they'll try this early. But what if they're 2 games in? Mm-hmm. What if you go 0-2 against the Vikings and the Commanders? I don't think they will. I think there's a better chance they go 2-0 than 0-2. But still, like, what if you're 0-2 or 1-3 or something like that, and you're trying this more vertical style offense? It's not working. Are you just going to dig in and say, I have to run this offense, so Daniel Jones, I'm benching you? Or do you think it's more likely that he kind of goes back to like what this guy does well is sort of the, quick game and RPO stuff, short area stuff. We have Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson. Let's just try to utilize them. I think that's more likely. I think that's where we're heading. If he can't take the big leap into running a vertical offense, and I have a hard time believing in year 6 he's going to suddenly fundamentally change as a quarterback. So I have a feeling if he can't do it, as long as he's healthy, they're going to go back to what he does well. He has some, I agree with you. He doesn't maximize yak. I think there's a reason guys don't have big yardage with him. It's not just he doesn't have great receivers. He can't hit him in stride, and you can't maximize the guy who's good after the catch if he has to stop to catch the ball every time, right? And I think Malik Neighbors is going to get a healthy dose of being bracketed, and if you can't hit him in stride and give him a chance to win, we're not going to see his maximal production. But I do think they may go back to that kind of offense, like where it wouldn't shock me if by like week 2, week 3, week 4, they're like, you know what, let's go back to that 2022 offense because it worked.
I think we're going to see baby steps. I think we're going to see baby steps to verticality. We're going to see a lot of that RPO and a lot of stuff that we've seen a lot recently. A lot of this is also going to be dictated by what the defense is doing to the New York Giants. Week 1, we play one of the most aggressive defensive coordinators in the National Football League. So there's going to be a lot of blitz beaters. There's going to be a lot of hot routes dialed into that. The protection is going to be dialed into protecting Daniel Jones if he is the starter. He's 1 year, not less than 1 year removed from a torn ACL at that point. So I don't know if they're going to want to be just 4 verts all the time, obviously, right? Not against that type of corner. You might see some quicker stuff. Oh, it's a one-on-one situation. Get the ball in Wandale's hands. Maybe you can make a guy miss, turn what would have been a 5-yard gain against this defense into a touchdown against another one, right? So I think it's more so that we might see more baby steps in the offense that we have seen over the last 2 years, something similar to that. But then certain situations, depending on what the defense does, we're going to, hey, Daniel, if you get this look, I want you to take that 9 route. I want you to hit that 9 route. And that's going to give Jones a little bit more opportunity to attack vertical. So I think that's more likely than them just going out and just bombing it deep. That's probably not what they're going to do with historically the way the New York Giants offensive line has done with a quarterback who has been injured. You don't want to really do 5-7-step drops all the time.
I want to make it clear, by the way, Sal, I agree with you, by the way. Yeah. I'm not saying I don't think that scenario could play out. Like, it could be a situation where, yes, Brian Daboll wants to finally let his offense play out the way that he's hoped for it to play out. Because, again, like, I agree with you. He's tried it at times in the past, but he has never been calling the plays, or at least not to our knowledge. He hasn't been calling the plays. I guess there's some speculation he might have, and we don't know. So now he really gets his chance to put his stamp on what he believes this offense can be. But I agree. If it's not working, they're not just going to keep doing it. And they're going to go back to what works for Daniel Jones. You're right. It's the RPOs. It's the quick hitting stuff. It's getting the ball out of his hands fast with like defined routes. And if not, letting him run. But I will say this, there has been moments like last year, for example, Tyrod Taylor had one of the highest explosive pass rates in the NFL of all quarterbacks. And a lot of what he did, by the way, wasn't, in my mind, at least, Brian Daboll, too much of Brian Daboll scheming up or Mike Kafka calling great plays. Sometimes it was just Tyrod Taylor understanding where things were at before the snap, doing like a 3-step drop, hitting his back foot and letting it rip. It was simple as that. Go watch the tape. You'll see it with your own eyes. It was a lot of 3 to 5 step drops. Tyrod Taylor diagnosed it before the snap, understood where the space was going to be post snap, and just let it rip. It wasn't watching these long things develop downfield with great pass protection. So in a lot of ways, like, these routes are always going to be available to Jones. That's just how this offense is designed. It's a matter of, can he process it? In my mind, a lot of it is before the snap at this point with Jones. Yes, we all know how he is after the snap, but he's got a much better understanding stuff before the snap and being able to predict where rotation is going to be and where the space is going to be post snap. That's all done before the snap, and just let it rip. And I'm sure Brian Daboll wants him to do this too. So we'll see if he can do it.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
Yeah. I'm curious. I've kind of moved past the quarterback discussion to some extent mentally, just for my own sanity this year, because I feel like they've set a pretty high bar for what they want in a quarterback. I don't know how they're getting there anytime soon. So I'm trying to think of how do I define success of this season, right? Because I'll criticize Joe Shane, I'll criticize Brian Dable, but I'm not somebody who wants anybody fired. I just want people to get better. So I want to define success, and I've been racking my brain thinking what would define success as a fan for me this year. And I have a few thoughts, but the way I look at it is I think there's a large variability about potential outcomes this season. That's just because there's so many unknowns, right? The entire defense is unknown. It's all young. The entire secondary, everybody's playing essentially out of position for the first time. Every single person is getting a promotion, no matter who's playing. You're going from CB2 to CB1, nickel to CB2, nobody to nickel, 2 new safeties, including a rookie essentially. I don't know how Micah McFadden fits into this defense. I think I'll be curious to see how good Bobby Okereke is in this defense. There's definitely somebody missing on the defensive line, even though we have 3 really great guys on the defensive line. And then on the offense, it's a whole new offensive line. Because there's so much variability and there's so many young players, I feel like the bell curve of outcomes is really wide, right? It's not like this really well-defined, this is what's likely to happen. True. It's just like this huge variability. It's probably going to land in like 6-7 wins. I think that's why Vegas has them there, just because there's just so many unknowns. I think that's where people think they're going to land. But it wouldn't shock me if everything clicked, that they were like an 8-9 win team. That would not shock me. So I'm trying to define what's successful. My definition of success would be, number one, seeing these young players the last few years that they drafted and brought in actually hit their stride and be impact players. And really on offense, I don't care about Daniel Jones specifically, but I'd like to see an offense that can put up at least 22 to 24 points per game consistently. Because in year 3 of Brian Dable, I would like to see at least, because that's like just league average. Can we get to a league average offense where we have a shot to win games? That's how I'm defining success. How about you guys?
Go for it first, Nick.
I think everything you said is spot on, but I think one of the biggest Achilles heel to the New York Giants since Brian Dable got here, and this is certainly it's not consistent with Brian Dable's history, is their lack of explosive plays. So I want to see an offense that can create some explosive plays and not rely solely on efficiency off of play action like they did so early on in the 2022 season. Because if you can just threaten defenses vertically, I think that can open up your offense, will open up your running game, will take a burden off of Daniel Jones, but that requires the offensive line, that requires the receivers creating separation, and then that requires very decisive decision-making from a quarterback who I would say is a little bit hesitant in that department, to be kind.
For me, it's like, first I want to start with your variable take, and then I'll get into what how I define success, Sal and Monte. But the variable take is interesting to me because it's like they did manage to win 6 games last year with a really, really bad situation from an injury luck standpoint, in my mind at least. And half of those came with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. Like, he's not really an NFL talent. He's good, could be a backup at some point, but that's not exactly, especially what he was like last year. Like toward the end of that DeVito run, the processing was, you could see it on tape. Like he was in the pocket. It was slower than what you saw from Jones earlier in the year. And that was the worst we've seen from a processing standpoint in Jones's career. And a lot of that was because of, again, the O-line or whatnot. But, I think this guy can coach to win games. So I kind of feel like it's not that variable. I think the Giants are going to be somewhere between 6 and 10, and it's just in that range. I can even see things breaking right. I don't see them losing. I don't see it going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 wins. I just don't see it. If they were able to win 6 last year, I just personally don't see it. And I never thought the roster is as bad as some other people do, to be completely honest. They have Andrew Thomas on this roster, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Deontay Banks. They have a lot. Like if you look around the NFL, there's some of these teams that have just ripped through the cap and like veteraned out, and they don't have any talent left on their roster. If you look at some of these rosters, not necessarily all of them. Obviously, the Giants are in the bottom tier, third tier, I would say. But anyway, to define success for me, it's interesting because it's both short-term and long-term as far as my opinion goes, right? Because short-term success for me is I want to see like 250 plus yards passing a game. I'm at that point now where that's where I'm defining success. I'm tired of watching these 200 yards passing game offense for the last 5 years. They can't throw the football at all. And you're winning some of these games, but it's like 197 passing. I'm looking to see passing. People may listen then and hear, I don't care, just win the games. No, because long-term, you're not going to win anything real if you don't have a passing offense in this league, consistent passing offense. So I want to see them actually take that step because then I'll have proof of maybe what I was suggesting before, which is like Dable can design a quarterback-proof offense or a quarterback-friendly offense or whatever you want to call it. But now the question is, long-term, this is where it gets tricky, right? If the Giants do take the step forward from both a win standpoint and a passing standpoint, is that what I or you or us really want to see? Because the issue being, I'm just going to be point blank with it. I'm not afraid to say it. People get offended by this. I don't understand why, but I don't believe in Daniel Jones long-term. Doesn't matter what he puts on tape this year, unless it's an insanely massive jump. I don't believe that he can take up 20% of a team's salary cap and you can consistently compete to win Super Bowls. And that's not to say I don't believe he can be a consistent playoff guy or whatever, take a huge jump to being a solid quarterback in the 10 to 15 range. He can be that, maybe. I don't care. I'm not arguing that point. I just set a bar really high. So please, if you're mad at that comment, understand, whoever's listening, that it's because I'm setting the bar super high. My bar is I don't want to allocate 20% of cap to any quarterback unless he's consistently helping you compete for Super Bowls year in, year out. Otherwise, I'll restart and go back to the well and figure out a different way to do this thing. So what I'm saying is, if they do take that step short term, it's a possibility that could be another step backward long term if they convince themselves again that, we can keep paying this guy 20% of our cap and try to win Super Bowls.
Yeah. I'll give my take as well as what I see success. One thing I wanted to say as well to your point though, Dan, I want to push back a little bit too, because a lot of people bring up like the 6 wins last year, and I definitely hear where you come from. But in the same time, we lost Wink Martindale and we led the NFL in turnovers last year. We led the NFL in turnover differential. We were the first team, I believe the stat was first team in NFL history not to make playoffs when they led the league in turnover differential. So like things really went our way last year with that. And that's not something that, even if we had Wink, is not something that typically carries over year to year. So, that's the one thing that, I keep in mind with that. The team I think overall will get better than it was last year. I just don't know if it will, turn into wins like it did the previous year because of that reason. But to kind of what your point there was, Dan, about like, what you see success and how it affects the quarterback for me, I right now, what I'm focused on, where I see success is, one of what kind of Sal said, seeing success out of these draft classes. Because one, I want to know if we have the GM. I want to get some more proof that Joe Shane is the guy and that his things. And then on the other side, I want to be confident that Brian Dable's the guy then this year. I want to see them coach fight above their weight, and really show again that last year was the outlier, not the first year, and that we have the guy. Because right now, the way I look at it is like last year, if we bottomed out, that was, best case scenario for me because you got your quarterback, you move on. This year, not a great quarterback class. And I think almost even more important is that what happens if you bottom out this year and you don't know if you have the head coach? Suddenly you have a head coach off bad back-to-back losing seasons. Are you then going to let him pick his quarterback? Are you going to let Joe Shane pick his quarterback? And then suddenly you have maybe a head coach and a GM on a hot seat, like Chicago Bears picking Justin Fields style, and they go, and the quarterback does not see immediate success, they get fired. So like for me, I'm just like, I know the quarterback's a problem, but we can figure out right now if our head coach and GM is, that's where kind of my focus is. That's where I'm seeing success. And I know that the quarterback is a pain in the ass and I want to get it figured out as soon as possible, but that's where my focus is right now.
It's fair. Because look, in the end, like it's going to be, well, I view this a little bit differently than Sal. I know that because we've had these conversations, but it's going to be hard to find that quarterback no matter what, in my opinion, at least. I especially with the bar that I set, because I set that bar even higher. Like to me, those Penix and whatever types were not my cut of it. Like to me, maybe you get it out of that, but it's not even, I don't feel as good about that as how many prospects are they going to get a chance at that really can change this franchise? It's a problem.
Well, I mean, it's a good segue into what we wanted to discuss with the rest of the time we have. But I just want, I'll say this: like they did set the bar high. Like you're right. I think the quarterback class coming up, without the benefit of seeing the season play out, obviously that can change a lot.
Yep.
When you're just looking at the talent pool, this is going to be a pretty bad year to swing in the top 10, I think, for a quarterback, and it might be one of those rare ideal years to swing on day two. I'm not a big fan of the day two quarterback, but this might be the year to swing on the upside talent that's not fully developed. That's going to have to hit the draft. So there are a few guys already that, like Monte and I have been watching their film, and they're guys who are probably not making it to the first round, but probably have requisite traits that you can swing on. And to me, maybe a good scenario here is Brian Dable proves his worth. They have maybe they punch above their weight a little bit. He's your guy. They don't force quarterback round one. Let's say they're drafted in the middle of the first round or something. They go BPA, get a defensive player, something like that. Whatever. It's a good, strong defensive class coming up. And they take a swing somewhere on day two. They get a developmental guy. And maybe it's Jones who's here. If they have a decent year, maybe it's somebody else. But they keep building the roster. And at least they've proven to you that, look, this regime is worth keeping and allowing them to continue roster building and coaching. I think that's probably the best case scenario.
Wouldn't winning just do that as well at this point?
Yeah.
Like after retire, like to Dan's point, winning 6 games last year was somewhat impressive. I know it sounds disgusting to say, but it really was, because it was like a net zero outcome for the New York Giants. Like, it was Murphy's Law. Everything went wrong for the Giants last year, and somehow they were able to manage 6 wins, which took them out of the 3rd pick, which the Giants so desperately wanted, as we've known and as we've learned in Hard Knocks episode 2. So even if Brian Dable can right the ship and just play competitive football and not be an absolute embarrassment and win some football games this year, that at least gives me the warm and fuzzy feeling that we have the guy, especially if he just calling plays and the offense is moving football. Then even if Daniel Jones isn't the quarterback we want him to be, if we see just the offense being capable and competent, that's going to at least allow me to say to myself or justify to myself that Brian Dable may deserve another year if the locker room stays together. That's a whole nother aspect to this. Is the Wink Martindale thing last year was kind of wild. I don't know if any of the defensive players have any kind of allegiance to him or if they have any animosity towards Brian Dable. I'm not suggesting that they do, but it's I don't want to say plausible, but if they did, that wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if they had this sort of true feeling for Wink Martindale and they felt like the head coach wasn't doing their defensive play caller and defensive coordinator right. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Yeah, definitely.
So he needs to prove that he can keep that shit together.
Yeah. He set a pretty low bar for himself, so it should be easy to hop over, right? Like, just don't have a meltdown on the sideline every week and win some games.
For real.
All right. Do you guys want to go into the fun little exercise we thought about doing as we head into the season? So let me give the background to everybody paying attention. I was going to say our listeners, our mutual listeners.
Yeah.
So because Monty and I do the breakdown of prospects all year, we are looking, as we go into our second year, we've talked a lot about how we're going to do things differently. And one way we're going to look at it is probably go into this and have a very objective way of like reviewing these prospects, their measurables, footwork, things like that. But you guys are the film guys. We watch you to find out like how NFL pro games are broken down, play design, everything. So what we asked Nick and Dan to do is pick 4 players at 4 different positions that they would like to see, like a hypothetical position that we should target in the upcoming draft. So it could be any position. We don't know what they're picking right now, but we want them to pick up like 4 guys, 4 positions, give it to us, and tell us like somebody who could help the Giants and actually give us a profile. Forget the player. Tell us what you're looking for in that player. And then Monty and I are we're going to use that template as we go through the player reviews in college to see if we can find players that fit what these guys are looking for. And it might make it a little bit more fun to review later. So I'll let you guys take it from there. Have you come up with your 4 guys?
I have not come up with 4 guys, but I actually kind of want to start with maybe a mini debate here because the cornerback position is the first position that came to my mind. I think it's safe to say that if you look at the Giants depth chart, there's a dearth of proven talent there right now. And I know they just drafted Andrew Phillips. We'll see how that works out. But I want to feel comfortable with a young cornerback opposite of Deonte Banks. I have faith in Deonte Banks. He's a good football player. Now we're switching to this more quarters, palms type of system. You still need to have an athlete with oily hips. But the debate that I wanted to kind of like throw at you guys, pause it out here, is Max Melton was a name that was linked to the New York Giants. And he had traits that I felt like would mesh well with really any defensive coordinator, but specifically with Shane Bowen, who was going to play off a little bit. The thing I loved about Max Melton was his explosiveness and his 0 to 100 acceleration when he was clicking and closing and driving downhill. It was freakish. And he was the first cornerback I evaluated. And I was like, dude, are they all this good? Like, this is kind of crazy, right? So I'm wondering if the Giants were looking at Max Melton and saying, we want him to basically be a slot, or do you think that the Giants maybe wanted him to be a boundary and maybe Andrew Phillips was just the contingency plan because Max Melton went high and then Andrew Phillips, because they have similar profiles. I would say Max Melton, I think he can play outside, but a lot of people would label him as a slot or a nickel as well. So I want to throw that at you to see what you felt about that.
Yeah, man. I think Sal and I both really liked how Max Melton translated to being a slot corner. And I do think that what you're saying probably makes a lot of sense is that, once Max Melton was off the board, I mean, we did hear a lot about them liking Andrew Phillips as well, but I do think that there was probably an idea where we've heard they prefer Cordell Flott outside and want to give him a shot at an outside corner. And I think that they really did have their heart set on trying to fill that nickel spot, which is, an important position within Shane Bowen's defense. So I think that, I don't know if they preferred Andrew Phillips or preferred Max Melton, but, we won't know because Max Melton went first. But yeah, I do think that, that was in a way, like you said, a contingency plan when they went Phillips said. What about you, Sal?
We loved Milton early on when we reviewed him. It's hard not to love because the first game we watched was his 2022 game against Ohio State.
Yeah.
And the way he held up against Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, I was like, this guy is on his own. Like, he's by far the best player on this team, and he's still taking out like the top receivers in the country. I was very impressed at how competitive he was, how quick he was. I think if I recall correctly, the only criticism I had of him was like when he was running down the field, he kind of didn't turn around.
Yeah,
fast enough, and he would. There were plays where he would just like run into the receiver, and you got away with that a little bit more in college. But I loved his aggressiveness. I loved his run support. I remember saying, I think when we did our Senior Bowl preview, I was like, this guy looks like a nickel to me. Like, I think he profiles more as a nickel in the NFL, and I do think, Nick, to your point, he would have been a perfect nickel who could play outside if you needed him to, but would have slided well. I think he probably was their target, but the way he blew up the combine, if I recall, his RAS score was like a 9.9 or something insane, right? Like he ran like a 4.33 or something crazy, or 4.35, or
40 plus inches.
Yeah, I mean, it was hilarious because all the guys we liked that we thought were kind of sleepers, like in the middle of the season, they all had ridiculous combines. I'm like, well, there goes that idea.
Right out the window, man.
Yeah,
no wonder they were so good.
Yeah, right.
I mean, because it shows up on tape, right?
Yeah,
you see the explosiveness, you see the speed, and you're like, why is nobody talking about this guy? A guy that, like, not your question, but a guy that I remember I pointed out to Monty back in like October. I was like, have you seen this guy Darius Robinson? Do you remember that? And like nobody was talking about him. I was like, look at this guy Darius Robinson. Look at his tape from Missouri, and we're watching him. We're like, holy shit!
I liked him a lot.
Yeah, it's like this
Yeah.
guy's
like in
he's
this class,
awesome.
and he was a sleeper.
Yeah.
People didn't even talk about him. He was so good. And then I heard, I believe it was like Brugler or somebody. One of them was like, "Yeah, when we asked like Kirby Smart, I believe, or one of these, I think it was Kirby Smart, like he's like, this is the guy in the SEC. Like this is the guy that's wrecking game plans in the SEC."
Brugler, it was I think it was either
Maybe it was
Brugler or
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah. I think Jeremiah had him in his first mock or something. He had him in the first round. I was like, oh my god, what's going on here? And that
we were getting like our 5th round of our mock drafts and we're doing simulators.
But not to stray too much from the point, Nick. But I think I think Max Melton is exactly the kind of prototype that they would have been looking for. I just think he did so well at the combine; it just made it impossible. Once we traded 39, I think I wasn't surprised that he was off the board at 47. Not at all.
So to circle back to the original question, I'm looking for a player on the outside similar to Max Melton. I would say a little bit more disciplined, though, and a little bit bigger and longer arms. Now, ideally, I like to have corners who have like 31 and a half. 32 is the benchmark. That doesn't always get reached, but a cornerback with 32-inch arms is typically something that you're always looking for. But I want a corner specifically in this system who is going to be decisive, who understands route combinations, and importantly, they really understand spatial awareness. They have that type of feel for where they are in relationship to the routes and where the routes are going to go. So somebody who is a high processor and is also explosive and has that quick twitch trigger downhill if they need to just plant and drive and go.
And
I'm sorry, but I'm assuming in this system of Shane Bowen, you're not prioritizing the punch anymore, right? Because he very rarely puts these guys in press situations, right? So we're sacrificing physicality at the snap for processing and spatial awareness. Is that right?
Yes, but I mean, I'm a stickler for physicality too. And like Cordell Flott looked like he's not somebody who's overly physical, but I want a cornerback who's going to have like the balls to be able to stick on a wide receiver and not allow a wide receiver to basically punish them off or just like flipper them off. Like somebody who has some play strength. And we're just thinking like an ideal type of guy, right? So the man coverage skills, the oily hips that Andrew Phillips has, the explosiveness of Max Melton, the long arms, and then the vision, the spatial awareness, and the overall football IQ to know where he is and where the receivers are.
Okay.
I like it.
Any sort of height requirements that you're looking?
I mean, I like somebody who's over 5'10" personally at the cornerback, preferably even a little bit taller than that with some of these freaks that are in the NFL running around at like 6'4". You got to cover like Drake London one-on-one. I kind of want somebody who is at least going to be in the ballpark. I think 6'1" is a good benchmark for a player who typically can still maintain some center of gravity that can keep him down to earth and he's not going to be uncoordinated or off balance. But I'm not too stuck with that. If they're like 5'9" or 5'9" is a little bit rough. They're 5'10" and like a Max Melton, for instance, and they're just a very controlled player, a very disciplined player who can open and close his hips. I'm going to be happy with that.
And those long arms.
And them long arms, but I think Melton had baby arms.
Close.
He's
described you want.
You're describing probably the best player in the draft coming up.
Michigan?
Yeah, Will Johnson. Yeah, you've basically described him to a T. But I don't know how he'll do with Wink Martindale. Like it's a very different system that he's going from Minter to Wink. So I'm curious how he looks by the end of the season. But I got you. That's a really good profile actually. So we'll have to keep notes on that one. So cornerback, that's your first one.
Yes.
All right. You got 3 more.
I'll stay.
Go ahead, Ben. Yeah,
we can go back and forth. I'll take 2. Nick can take 2. I'll stay on the defense side of the ball because something you mentioned earlier really stood out to me, and it was a little bit of reservation when it comes to will Micah McFadden translate to this new system, because I thought he did really well eventually in Wink Martindale's system. Wasn't that he was without his flaws, but he had his moments. Bobby Okereke, I'm less concerned about because I've seen some moments in space that I liked a lot from a coverage standpoint. But I know based on this system and all the resources they poured into, it was no coincidence that they unloaded all those picks into defensive backs. They knew that they need to revamp. Like they've built this defensive backs out for a specific cause and a specific system, and now it's going to be totally different, as Nick just did a great job outlining. I feel like the second level is also going to be totally different from what they expected as linebackers. This is something that Shane Bowen himself even said, I believe, on Hard Knocks. So the first episode, I believe. So what I'm looking for at that second level, and something I've been looking for a while, is a linebacker who is pass coverage first, but also operates really well in space. There have been so many guys that Nick and I have talked about on day 2 and 3 prospects in our pre-draft process over the last 3 years of doing this. The Giants never drafted any of them, but they were guys that we looked at and we watched on tape and we're like, these guys have the upside. The guy, the kid I love this year from that standpoint was the kid out of Washington State. Henley, was it this year or last year? It was this
last year.
Last year's draft. Okay,
Yeah.
2 years ago. And I don't know how he's done year 1, whatever, but like that style.
Some of the Patriots, right?
No, I thought he went to the Chargers. If I'm
the
not
Chargers.
mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I could be wrong about that. But I thought he went to the Chargers. But that style of linebacker, someone who's really good in space, it's similar to what Nick said, has length to get into passing lanes, but most importantly has like just that spatial awareness and that IQ, which again goes to being good in space because they need something so different. They haven't had that really at linebacker in a long time. Like if you really think back, it almost goes back to like Michael Boley. That's the last time they had that kind of linebacker in this system, in any system that the Giants are running. And I believe that was with Perry Fuel as the coordinator, who was more of that kind of off coverage space-based system. So I'm looking at that position. I'm looking at them finally getting one of those day 2 or day 3 linebackers that can play in space. And I'm not trying to say Micah McFadden can't do it. Let's wait and see. Obviously, it's a long time to go until then, but I have my reservations about how he's going to potentially fit this system.
And then you'd be looking at Okereke playing like more. I mean, it's not 4-3, but playing more of like that Mike, and then allowing this next linebacker kind of like more freedom to play pass coverage and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like just any NFL defense is not really 3-4 or 4-3. It's mostly just sub packages for 75% of the plays anyway.
Yeah, that's fair.
So right off the bat, like I can think of 3. I know we're not doing this immediately, but there's 3 guys right off the bat that I can think of that probably fit the bill. One of them is going to go in the first round. Is a kid out of LSU, Harold Perkins. I don't know if you've seen him yet, but he's sort of like he's being described as like sort of like this year's version of Micah Parsons.
Oh, wow.
Like he's like sort of like nobody should not fair to put that on a kid, but he's that really elusive athlete playing middle linebacker, but he can be a pass rusher as an edge. He can run out and cover tight ends. He's a very versatile athlete. He's a little undersized, but they're all undersized now. That's the thing. Like you can't. They're 6'1", 220 is sort of like how big they are now coming out of college. Like you're not getting too many of these 6'3", 250 guys anymore, right? So you got to choose. If you want the guy you're talking about, these are more of the undersized guys. The other guy that comes to mind is a kid who, if he came out last year, I think would have probably been in talks for linebacker 1. Barrett Carter out of Clemson. He was running mate with Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and he was awesome. He's a freak athlete. He's a great blitzer. He's really, really athletic. Like he can get into coverage and a little bit of a smaller guy. And the third guy I can name right now is, I mean, he might emerge big time. He's a little bit of a larger, bigger wingspan guy, Danny Stutzman out of Oklahoma. So just 3 names to throw at you guys for watch if you get a chance and see if any of them fit the bill. But I see what you're saying. You want somebody who can drop back into zone and follow routes and be support in the run game, but not necessarily the guy that you're counting on being the Mike, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the perfect player that Dan and I went over, I think 2 drafts ago, would be Dorian Williams from Tulane. Yeah. So a player like that, you can get him maybe 3rd round, 4th round. He can come in, and for the Bills this year, he had a pretty big impact. But to go on to my second one, if you guys are cool with that, staying on the defensive side of the football, and this is something that a lot of Giant fans have discussed quite often this season. I believe it was brought up a little bit in Hard Knocks as well, and then also with the Christian Wilkins thing. But it's defensive line, specifically 3 technique, specifically somebody who has a quick upfield burst who can penetrate. There's been a lot of talk about penetration, my friends. Okay, like Shane Bowen was talking a lot about it, but I want that aggressive 295 pound player who can fire off the line of scrimmage, times the snap well, stays low through his 1st, 2nd, 3rd steps, actually knows how to use his hands, and can dip and have flexibility in his lower half. A player like that. Like, honestly, dude, I bring this up a lot on Big Blue Banter. Dexter Lawrence is a freak. Like there just aren't players like Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence is wildly flexible for a guy who's 346 pounds. Now I want somebody who's maybe 50 pounds lighter who is just going to threaten one-on-one matchups, because Dexter Lawrence had like a 71% double team rate last year. He's getting double teamed all the time. Now you have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau in the wide 9 base that we're going to see on third down. We're going to see wide 9 to stretch those angles out, to force those tackles into deep vertical sets, double team on Dexter Lawrence. And if we can add a player like Braden Fisk from this past draft, who ended up going to the Rams, blew up the combine. Now, the guy had Van Wilder thing going on. He was in school for like 5 years or something. Like, I didn't love that about him, but I understood that he was very good when he was stunting and twisting because he was controlled. He had great footwork and his change of direction was solid. But if you just asked him to penetrate as well, he had that too. So I think the Giants defense can be taken to another level if they can find a player like that. And we're all hoping that some of these like 285 pounds, like the Ryder Andersons of the world and players like that, Casey Rogers, they can become that. Maybe they can, who knows? But at this point, a player of maybe higher draft caliber to be put into that position to complement Dex, I think that can really assist this defense in this pass rush.
I totally agree with you, Nick. Sal and I that was both a big want,
high priority of ours.
Yeah, I was like
we were pissed after the draft that we didn't walk away with one of these guys. There were so many guys in the last draft.
The kid from LSU I like too, not the gigantic 5-star one.
You're talking about Mekhi Wingo.
Mekhi Wingo, yeah.
He was so late too. He was right there.
He went in the 6th round, right?
Yeah, Yep, he was there when we took the special teamer. I was like, let's take Wingo. But yeah, man. I mean, especially with Andre Patterson, play to the strength of your coaches, the guys who can develop. Get it in these guys' hands, and that's how you can get your true difference makers. I had a question for you just with this. How do you value length in these guys, or is it more just quickness and you're fine with them being shorter because they have more leverage? How do you feel about that?
So I don't mind short. I do like long arms though. So I'm kind of a stickler for, so like as an Azeez Ojulari, look, injuries have just plagued this guy's career, but I felt like, and I still feel like his prototype is a good one. Somebody who is very explosive, somebody who is very flexible. He's 6'1", maybe 6'2", has 34-inch arms. So he can remain low with a nice sturdy center of gravity, and there's the surface area for tackles to strike are already low, so they're going to have to get off balance trying to punch him, and he can also swivel at the hip and present that inside shoulder. There's just not a lot of contact area for them to gain, and he's flexible enough to bend. So that's why I've always liked that profile from an edge rusher. If you look at Aaron Donald, guy's like 6 foot, right? Now he's an absolute freak in nature, but if you 6 foot and you have long enough arms and you're quick and you're strong at the point of attack still, I'm fine with that. But when you're like 6'1", and you have like 31-inch arms as a defensive lineman, it's tough because they can just dictate to you all the time. So that is an issue for me. With Azeez and a player like that, though, you can dictate, because you can stay low, you can punch up 34 inches, make that contact, and then that can set up your subsequent move to take advantage of what the tackle is doing to you. So I don't really mind about the height, but the length, I'm a little bit of a stickler for.
I hear it.
So let's just summarize what you're looking for. Then you want somebody who's basically, it sounds like you want somebody who can stunt twist, can be a one gapper. Is what you're looking for.
Somebody who's quick off the snap.
Right. And somebody who basically is going to take advantage of the lanes created by Dexter Lawrence getting double teamed to provide interior pass rush is what your priority is. Right. Yeah. I agree with you. So it's not a guy. That's something we're looking for too. We're going to put that in the vault to look for. Let me throw a name out at you that I feel like we could solve this problem in August. And another one that infuriated me that we didn't pick this guy up, but he went undrafted. The kid from Miami, Leonard Taylor. Did you look at his film at all?
I did not. No.
I didn't get a chance to either. No.
So Leonard Taylor, prior to the season, was in talks as DT1 coming out last year. Wow. He was in that. He was not like Johnny Newton, but he was like right behind him in terms of his ability as a pass rusher. He's 6'3", at the combine. He was 6'3", 303, almost 34-inch arms. Yeah. Right. He didn't test elite. He tested okay. Right. But he is a freak athlete on film. Now, here's why he went undrafted. He's a natural 3 to 5 tech. And Cristobal at Miami had the kid playing nose tackle last year. Way out of position. And he had to gain weight for it because I think he played at like 290 before that. And he went up to 300 for nose. Despite playing nose out of position, I think he had like a 13% pass rush win rate, which is like double what you're supposed to do on the interior.
Wow.
Yeah. And so here's why I think we can get him. The Jets signed him as a UDFA I don't know about character issues. I never know why some of these
Sure.
guys don't get drafted. There might be something there. I didn't hear any health issues. It might be character, it might be testing wasn't what people expected. Whatever it was, he put it on film as a pass rusher on the interior, playing out of position, kind of like the opposite of Dex when he should have been playing nose and he was playing on the outside for years under Patrick Graham. And you knew that just if you put him in the right spot, he would eventually take off. I feel like this is sort of like where Taylor is. That Jets depth chart at D-line is ridiculous. It is hard for me to see that kid make the team. And I don't know what they're looking for, but he stunts, he twists, he has incredible length. He's an incredibly good pass rusher already. And I feel like with Andre Patterson, a guy with his measurables could become a very good run stopper too. So I would keep an eye on him if you watch any of the Jet stuff. Leonard Taylor.
I like that.
Yeah.
Excellent call,
The
Sal.
love child of Leonard Marshall and Lawrence Taylor, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do like that call, Sal. And if that comes true, it's going to be cool to remember back on this podcast in the middle of July, early July,
But why didn't we? I don't understand what we're looking for, right? Because he seemed to fit the bill. I'm like, oh man, this guy's a UDFA. This should be your first phone call. And I mean, maybe we call, but why he went to the Jets, I don't know. Like the odds of that guy cracking that Jets D line,
right?
Yeah. So but anyway, but if we don't get a guy like him, this is a really good D line class again. Like we're lucky. There's back-to-back good years, but it might have to be early in the draft. So how high would you be willing to take it? Just to have that discussion with the value of D linemen. How high are you willing to go here?
So it's a little. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to first round, but it also depends on where the Giants are being, what happened. Like right now, it's hard for me to project exactly where I want to put the value for a draft that's going to happen next April when I don't know what happened this entire season. But I wouldn't be opposed, say, if there was a player on the defensive line who would slide in there and just make this 4-man pass rush that much better, and there wasn't as many players around where this player is being selected in the first round that can complement the New York Giants roster and enhance the New York Giants roster as well as him, then I'm not a stickler for spending a first round pick on a defensive lineman, even though we have Dexter Lawrence.
Okay.
And they almost spent $24 million a year at Christian Wilkins. So
that's true.
I put that poll out. I don't know if you saw it. I asked,
see it.
I got a lot of traction, and the results were. I asked the question. Now that we know the Giants are willing to go after Christian Wilkins, and it sounds like we're going to find out, but it sounds like they changed plans once they got the opportunity to get Brian Burns. Would you have rather just traded the pick like we did, second and a fifth, including pick 39 this year, get Burns and pay him $28.5 million, whatever we paid him, or would you rather just sign Wilkins for $27 million, and keep that second round pick? But I personally would have made the trade anyway. I think elite 25-year-old edge rushers, 26-year-old edge rushers don't hit the market. And I do think Burns is elite. I know he hasn't quite hit his mark yet, but I do think he has elite traits and he's going to be one of the top guys in the league. So I would have made the trade, and I think 70% of people agree. But what did you guys think? Would you have done the same thing, or would you have thought about just signing Wilkins and saving the pick?
We discussed this a bit on our podcast, but for me, I'm actually personally not as high on Wilkins as other people are. And again, I want to qualify that by saying, like, I don't have the time to watch all Dolphins tape. So I haven't seen much, but I did watch a breakdown of him against the Chiefs in that playoff game. And it was not what I'm looking for to allocate $24 million a year to. He was completely taken out of the game by the Chiefs, and they have a good interior offensive line. But again, like, I just don't assume that type of thing will happen for Dexter Lawrence at his price tag or Brian Burns. So to me, it's really the player difference there with because you're going to get Cooper DeJean. By the way, if you're good enough to draft, you're going to get Cooper DeJean if you don't trade 39. And then the other part of it, which I talked about in the podcast, is if you get Cooper DeJean at 39, you're probably not taking Drew Phillips, and instead you're probably taking maybe Cooper Beebe or Christian Haynes. So it's like a big domino effect. So it's like thinking about that, but I still don't care. I don't really like Christian playing a guy named Wilkins at that price. So I would prefer Burns. I think he's going to be a better player for the Giants.
Yeah, I preferred Burns as well. Look, you're just trying to get players who have rare traits. You have a lot of guys who have rare traits in that defensive room right now, and I'm still not even sold on the defense in general. But you have rare traits with Brian Burns, and you have rare traits with Dexter Lawrence, like truly rare.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. It was close, but also keep in mind Wilkins is turning 29 this season. So
right,
it's he's older. He's a few years older. Yeah.
Yeah, Burns just turned 26, I think.
Yep, in April. Yeah. So, Dan, do you want to give us our last one here?
Yeah. I'll close out with our last one here. I could grab the low-hanging fruit and take quarterback with my fourth choice, but I actually feel like we don't. We should do this in the future when we reconvene. To break down all the traits we want out of a quarterback, I think it's its own podcast or at least its own segment for a lot longer. And I'd like to get everyone's thoughts. I'm not going to grab that fruit. I'm going to reach a little bit higher. I'm talking about something I've wanted on this roster for a while. And it could be any of three positions, because I really do believe the third one even will be up for grabs depending on how the season goes. I've been looking for on this team a difference making from a strength standpoint, a pop standpoint, interior offensive lineman. And let me say this. There have been guys I've studied. When Frank Ragnow came out of the draft, you can find it on Twitter. There's receipts all over. I felt like he was worth a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. That's what it felt like watching his tape, the impact he made. And it was different than some of these other interior offensive linemen who've been ballyhooed over the years. Even to a lot of extent, a lot of the center ones, the John Michael Schmitzes of the world. And even if you put Joe Tippmann as the center one, these guys were not at that same level. I saw it a little bit, by the way, and watch a lot, but I saw a little bit about the kid I like the kid a lot from West Virginia, Frazier. He wasn't as big as Ragnow, though. What I'm looking for is more just like that difference-making, defining strength on the interior offensive line, especially because that will allow you to do so many different things from a power gap standpoint, which is really where Brian Dable and Mike Kafka have been at their best from designing the run game, but someone to really set the tone on the interior offensive line. I'm not so sure that's John Michael Schmitz right now, Jermaine Illuminor, or John Runyon. I think they can all be quality players and fill the role that they're asked to do, but I'm looking for somebody on that interior offensive line who sets the tone. Like I got
a guy.
Yeah, who is it?
Evan Neal.
Yeah, but I don't think he ever was going to. I don't think he was ever going to be that guy either. Even when we evaluated him, Nick, like what we thought his strength would be at the NFL, I never thought it was going to be that mauler in the run game. Personally,
the other offensive guy was the other offensive lineman, Kwanu. Kwanu was that.
Yeah, he was.
Kwanu was that.
But I want it on the interior.
Yeah.
I don't want it at tackle. I think when things go so much wrong, there's too many things that go wrong at tackle. There's too many variables. But on the interior, when you find that Ragnow type, you know it. Like I knew it when I watched him, and he's every bit as good as what he was drafted to be.
Now, you're 100% right. The reason why I brought up the Evan Neal thing was the few times that the Giants have run duo with Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas next to each other.
It has been fun.
Oh, my God, dude. It's so much fun watching them just uproot this poor 5 technique and just drive him to the freaking moon.
I think he can be a good guard. I mean, I actually, we talked about this, that we wanted to see Illuminor and Neal just flat out compete for the job. I'm sure I don't know if you guys agree in camp. Best man. And the way I look at it is if Evan Neal is the 7th overall pick in your third year, if you can't flat out beat like a league average right tackle, that's what I think Illuminor is basically. Yeah. If you can't flat out beat him in camp, you're not a tackle anymore. And you might be a really good guard, and guards are worth like $20 million a year if they're really good. Yep. Get your ass to guard and go make some money and earn it, because you're not going to earn it at tackle.
I don't hate that idea. Yeah, go ahead. You go first, Nick.
My one point of contention would just be because Evan Neal is not fully healthy right now, and I think training camp might be like a period of kind of gradually getting ingratiated into the offense and then kind of going. I wanna give him that chance again, and I know this is just stupid. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And now this would be like the third time, right? But I want to just try to get as much out of that investment. And if it doesn't work, then you go to guard, and you can even do it in the season because Illuminor knows how to operate with Carmen Brasil. I think he's professional enough, but I think your point is solid though, Sal. Like he should be able to be. It's just that injury is one bugaboo I have.
Your point is great. And in an ideal world, it makes sense to me, but my issues are one, I think that a lot of football, and maybe more so at corner, and especially at corner, but even at position like tackle, is just confidence from an athlete. And I think it'll just totally shoot his confidence. The way you've noticed how he's interacted and things he said, it could be a confidence killer for him, which could derail his career. The other thing is I just don't buy too much into training camp mattering as much as other people do. Like, I don't know if like a competition, like none of these reps are really that, like if the only way I think it could really be done is week 1, he's right tackle. Week 2, it's Illuminor. And week 3, you do like a 2-game sample size of actual games, real games where they're actually competing, not in camp when there's really, it's kind of football, but it's really feeling more like football to me. So that's the only way I could see they could ever do it, but I don't think a team would ever really do that.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I'll say to this, because I've made the argument to Sal. I completely hear where you're coming from, Dan, just ruining his confidence. That's a factor you really have to. I haven't taken too much in consideration, but I should. But really, is that I would just move Neal straight up the guard at this point.
Yeah, and that's it, right?
Because the way I look at it is, what Sal mentioned, how much these guys are getting paid. They're getting paid close to what tackles are getting paid. And I think, I've listened to you guys' podcasts, and I think, we're all kind of agreeing. It's like, at this point, we're just hoping Evan Neal can be an average offensive tackle. To me, if you move him to guard, that resets my expectations.
True.
I don't know what you could be. You saw guys like Sam Cosmi go from below average tackles to like all pro caliber guards. You saw it with Tevin Jenkins. You saw it with
even Eric Flowers bought a couple years ago.
Yeah, he went from totally terrible to like decent.
Yeah.
So you don't know. Like maybe it could totally change his career. So like this, but yeah, the confidence part is something to consider though with this.
Getting back to what you were describing though, so it sounds like you want somebody who's strong with good leverage, because that's what that was. Zach Frazier was a leverage guy. Wasn't he like an all-state wrestler? Three-time like all-state champion in wrestling or something like that, or
West
whatever.
Virginia, yep.
Yeah, which that's if you can wrestle in West Virginia,
and he was the first freshman starter on the offensive line like 30 years at West Virginia.
Right. So like Christian Haynes would have fit that bill perfectly.
Yes.
Right? Like that's that strong leverage type guy. So okay. I wish we got Christian Haynes. It was so frustrating to watch him like fly down the board and us not grab him. But yeah, that's how I felt about the whole draft.
Also to add on to what you're looking for, Dan, kind of like with, Ragnar example, those big, movers, but, guys who are athletes too, not just guys who have popped because they're big. Like Ragnar was a sub 5 40 guy. Like,
to be fair, like what I'm describing is not going to be in every class. What I'm describing is like the one few times where you say, okay, I can actually invest a top 15 on interior offensive line, because the NFL doesn't like to do that. But it's like, no, this guy you can do it on, and he changes your whole offensive line. And it seems like, it's tough to get these guys, but in reality, they do fall to like the 10-15 range. It feels like. I don't know. Ragnar was what, like 17 or something like that. Like I think it was mid-teens to the 20s range.
Like Ragnar,
centers always fall.
Linderbaum, those are the two guys that come to mind that fit like the bill you're describing, right? So, but not a lot of those guys.
They're not. They're rare.
Yeah, if Linderbaum fits into that description.
It's like when we were talking about early in the process 2 years ago, like John Michael Schmitz at 30, or the pick that they took Deontay Banks at. That was not like, I wasn't on board. Yeah. That's not the type I'm talking about. And I'm not trying to dissuade. Like John Michael Schmitz, I think he can be a lot better this year. I don't think they utilized him correctly at all, personally, from a schematic standpoint. They didn't use, and I think just playing next to those two guards hurt him a lot as a rookie. But I still want someone in addition to John Michael Schmitz. It could be a guard that plays next to him that really sets the tone from a physicality standpoint.
Yeah, he's not a difference maker. He's a glue guy, stability, potentially all that, but like he's not going to change how your offensive line operates.
I think that's one interesting conversation, though, that we can monitor throughout the year is John Michael Schmitz, because last year, to Dan's point, and also the shit that he had to play next to, he had to play next to a bunch of guys, a guy who just recovered from a torn ACL, who was a day 3 pick, playing next to him, a dude who just came off the couch. Like, he was not put into a good position from a continuity standpoint and from a competency standpoint with the teammates. And that's a big deal when you're playing center and you're learning and you're trying to mentally process how to set certain things up and all of that. So I'm really hoping that Runyon and Illuminor, that is a stabilizing factor to the development of John Michael Schmitz, because if we swing and miss on Evan Neal, that is a huge indictment on Joe Shane. If we swing and miss on Evan Neal and John Michael Schmitz, come on now.
That's it. At that point, that's it.
Do you think he was maybe hurt a lot by just being asked to block in a way that he just wasn't very good at in college? I mean, he was pretty much a pure zone blocker, right?
That's why I don't understand why I completely agree with that. That's what I was saying. They don't think they utilized him right last year.
Yeah, why are you spending a top 60 pick on a guy just to not use him? A guy who's like 25, 26 years old, whatever he was when he came out, to not use him to his strength. Not use him to his strength. It makes us like, if you were going to just throw anybody out, like I was more of a proponent of. And I like John Michael Schmitz a lot, but I was big on Oluwatimi to get out of Michigan because I knew we could get him later. And I didn't see a lot of daylight between him and JMS. I was like, JMS is better, but Oluwatimi is a really solid plug-and-play kind of center. He gets the job done, nothing fancy. You can get him on day 3, and you can use that second-round pick on something else. So I didn't hate taking JMS. I think it's a great pick. But then to use him how they did, set him up for failure, and then watch him fail, and people are questioning, did you take the right kid? Like, did he all of a sudden become a bad football player? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. I feel like we do that a lot. We take guys and we use them not to their strength. And I want to see that just stop. right? Use him as a zone blocking player. We have a bunch of zone running backs, right? Every running back in that room is a guy who's like a one cut zone read type running back. I'd like to see them actually block that way this year.
Yeah, that's a big step. I think we will, but we'll see. That obviously remains to be seen.
I want to say the Giants. Oh, I'm sorry. The Giants did run more zone last season than they did in the previous year, like a considerable amount more.
Do you have the numbers by any chance on that? Or
I just pulled up Saquon Barkley's thing. So 2023, Saquon Barkley had 148 zone rushes, 93 gap. In the previous season, it was 134 zone and then 170 gap. And I want to see, so like I remember a lot more zone down the stretch of this season, and it seems to check out here from the New England.
Was he playing then?
Who's that? John Michael Schmitz?
Yeah. How much was he playing?
He was hurt for some games. I don't have that right in front of me, but just from the New England game all the way to the end of the season, Saquon Barkley himself had more than 10 or more zone rushes in every game except for the New Orleans game.
Okay.
So, but even some of those are like a lot of those are zone read though too. So RPO and then it's a zone read. So I think the way Pro Football Focus calculates it, it gets grouped in as a zone rush. So there are like a lot of variables to this.
Yeah, it just didn't feel like that's when you were watching it. It didn't feel like that's what they were doing with it. I don't know. Maybe that was just my bias at that point, but I just hope they use him to his strength. And I don't think he's like a bad pick. I really don't think he's a bad player. I think he's fine. I just don't think he's a difference maker. Like I never thought he would.
I think that's what it comes down to, because like even having him out there, I still want to run power guy. I want to have a diversified rushing attack. And just because that might not be his strength, I don't want that to hold the offense back. Because then it's like, dude, like, why are you even starting? Why did we spend this pick on you? I think he can be functional as a power guy. It's just he's best when it's like, oh, we're all blocking in one direction. Okay, I'm chipping. Okay, the guard from the backside's coming, passing it off, and now I'm climbing up to the second level and cutting off the angle of the safety or the will linebacker. And I think that's where he's best. And we saw a little bit of that last year, but it was a pass protection that was kind of a bigger deal in my opinion. I feel like he was more of a liability in pass protection than maybe I expected from his Minnesota tape, which wasn't amazing in pass protection, but it was more than functional. I would say it was good. There were a couple plays. I think there was a play against like Indiana where I think it was Johnny Newton actually just pitched like to the side. And I was like, oh shit, but so I want to see an improvement in pass protection specifically with JMS.
I'll also say to, some of my confidence that hopefully JMS and Neil can get better is, I swear to God, those guys played their best football when they first stepped on for the Giants and then just got progressively worse every single game they were underneath Bobby Johnson. So, hopefully with a new coaching, at least they can get back to where they started and move forward from there.
We all got to hope that at least happens.
All right. So anything else, boys? Anything else that we got to go over with the New York Giants? We're mid-July right now. We got training camp coming. Are you guys going to training camp?
No, I lost out on the weekend tickets. Got a new job, so I can't take time off for the week. But I was trying to get one of those Sundays, couldn't get it. They're already sold out.
Damn it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to save my trips for like a game or two this year if I can get up there, and we'll see about Senior Bowl. We talk about that all the time. Like, should we do it? I'm going to have to build up some serious brownie points in my household to get to Mobile.
So it's I'll work on time, though, dude. It's a great time.
Did you guys go last year to Senior Bowl?
I haven't been there. I haven't been there since 2020, I think. But I went 4 years in a row, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Bobby and Justin were telling us you guys come down. We were talking. So let me see. Well, I'll see if I can do that. It might end up being a time for Disney for my family. We'll see. Yeah.
All right. If we don't have anything else, Dan, you want to lead us out in typical Dan Schneider fashion?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you to everybody tuning in to this crossover podcast. Very fun to do. We got the He's a Giant podcast. We got the Big Blue Banter podcast. You guys said, like I said, check them out during the season. And now they're going to start their summer scouting series. So you're going to get an inside look at some of these college prospects that Nick and I are not going to have a chance to dive into for another 5 months. So they're going to give you the heads up, and they're going to keep going throughout the draft season, I assume. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure that's the plan. So keep it locked and loaded on both these pods. And obviously, you guys know where to find us on Twitter, I hope, by this point, or wherever else you want to find our work. But otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.